Hi, I'm Claire Glenn. I'm a senior in environmental science, and today I'm going to be talking about climate change. Climate change is a term that has been around for years, but to many, climate change is still a very confusing topic. It is understandable, of course. Climate change is one of the most complex and challenging problems facing our world today. To be able to understand much of the discourse around climate change, a scientific background is often needed. This education barrier is one of the many reasons climate change is so difficult to understand for the general public and for political action to occur. I hope that when you finish listening to me today, you have learned the basics of climate change, some of its most pressing issues, its real-world connections to environmental justice, and how to do your own research on climate change. First off, what is climate change? NASA defines climate change as the long-term change in the annual weather patterns that have come to define Earth's local, regional, and global climates. When we study climate change effects, we are not simply looking at what has occurred over the last 5 years. This would be the study of other variants. The scientific community is going back decades into meteorological, ocean, space, agriculture, and health data to analyze overall trends and patterns. Two helpful concepts can be used to understand the interconnectivity of actions and natural processes that create climate change. The first is ecosystems, which is a highly interconnected community where nature and the organisms that live in it are highly dependent on each other. The other term is chain reaction, when a series of events occur due to the previous one. The world is one large ecosystem where we as human beings are dependent on the nature to survive, and nature is dependent on us to help maintain the balance. When we make extreme modifications to the ecosystem by mass logging, air pollution, pesticide use, and many more, we alter the ecosystem's balance and possibly destroy the very thing we need to survive beyond restoration. As for the chain reaction, that can be best understood in terms of global warming. There is often a lot of confusion between global warming and climate change. So to set the record straight, global warming is the effect of climate change and is the overall global increase in temperature of the atmosphere, primarily due to the greenhouse effect. Global warming does not mean that we won't have snow or that we won't have things like polar vortex. It merely means that when we look at the annual temperature over the last 100 years, there's an evident rise in temperature in correlation to increased air pollution. The greenhouse effect occurs when the solar radiation emitted from the sun arrives at the Earth's surface. Some of this radiation is reflected back into space in the atmosphere, and some is absorbed by Earth's surface in the clouds. What causes the warming of the Earth is when that infrared radiation is re-emitted into the atmosphere by Earth's surface, into all directions. This radiation warms the surface and lower atmosphere. When we emit different air pollutants like carbon dioxide or other heat-trapping gases, when we burn fossil fuels at power plants or even drive our cars, we increase the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. This increase in greenhouse gases is like wrapping yourself in an extra blanket in the summertime. Things get really hot quickly. Going back to the idea of having snow, polar vortexes, and record-breaking temperatures, one of the other main effects of climate change is an increase in extreme weather events. The impact of climate change on severe weather depends on the meteorological conditions necessary for a storm to form. So I will only focus on tropical cyclones, including hurricanes and typhoons. As the greenhouse gases warm the Earth, we see an increase in evaporation from the oceans, increasing the air's moisture content. Moisture is the crucial ingredient for tropical cyclones. So when we add more, it increases the latent heat, which is the heat required to chain phages without even having a change in temperature. This increased heat and moisture fuels the storm, and when the water condenses, it forms more rain and clouds. Now, what are the effects of this increased moisture and latent heat? Increased fuel allows the storm to go on longer and go over more land, causing more people to be affected by the cyclone. It causes more rain, stronger storm surges, increased flooding, and its severity. All of these increases in precipitation, a wider affected area, increased flooding, and stronger storm surges result in stronger tropical cyclones, ultimately causing more damage. By just increasing the global temperature, we have set off a chain reaction. Increased moisture is not the only reason we have seen an increase in extreme weather. Rising sea levels, sulfur-suppressing rainfall, and increased thunderstorm activity, and increased global temperatures have contributed to that droughts have also an impact. Climate change can also be very damaging to human health, with increased risk for asthma and lung cancer from increased pollution, increased risk for skin cancer from the breakdown of the ozone layer, and increased waterborne illnesses due to water pollution. Speaking of water pollution, I'm sure almost everyone has heard of the Flint water crisis. When Flint switched its water from the Detroit Water and Sewage System Department to the Flint River, problems started occurring almost immediately. Flint River was highly polluted, and when the water was eventually sent out to residents, there was no corrosion inhibitor added, resulting in high levels of lead and chlorine in the water, so much so that the GM plant in Flint had to stop using the water because it was corroding their car parts. These high levels can be extremely damaging to the neurological system and have impacts for generations. What Flint highlights so alarmingly well is that climate change will affect our most vulnerable populations the hardest. As a result of systemic oppression, these communities have little political power, allowing them to be the most exploited by industry and government officials who are looking for a place to ease their bottom line. There are other issues related to climate change, like reduced crop yield, rising sea levels, and species migration. I encourage you to do this research on your own to fight against climate change successfully. We need as many educated people as we can. When doing further investigation, it is most important to trust peer-reviewed academic research. You can find this information on climate.nasa.gov, NOAA, peer-reviewed research articles from reputable journals, and the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. The IPCC is a UN body that provides scientific research assessments based on peer-reviewed research to policymakers so they can make informed decisions about climate policy. When seeing a news article about climate change, be skeptical. If the article does not mention any scientific information, don't trust it. If the news article doesn't cite where it's getting the information from, don't trust it. Google the effects or subject matter yourself and look for the information on the sources I mentioned. Through my talk, I hope that you gained a better understanding of climate change, its effects, and how to research it properly. Make sure your education on climate change doesn't end today.